Feels like over there is still more of the wild, wild west, even though it's out in the east.
Smart contract Zapier, that's a good one.
In between supply and demand, there's just friction.
And we need more apps, and they're coming as their own chain.
It's going to end up going from the superchain to Arbitrum Orbit to mainnet to Solana. GM guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of The Roll-Up. Today we have a special episode about commerce automation. This is sort of a form of chain abstraction. We're going to get into the details of it and why it's a little bit different from some of the other subsections of chain abstraction, like orchestration or order flow and auctions. Check out our chain abstraction map if you haven't already. But today we have the pleasure of speaking with Griffin from Halliday. He is a Stanford computer science attendee, and we are very excited to explore his approach to chain abstraction and commerce automation. You guys aren't going to want to miss this one. Before we get into it, a word from our sponsors. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Ignition, Mantle's newest campaign to liberate the growth power of Bitcoin. FBTC Ignition has officially begun with a total token supply of over 2,000 FBTC with a TVL of over 150 million. Right now, you can go on the FBTC website to see all of the featured campaigns, staking opportunities, and liquidity pools where you can utilize FBTC on-chain today for some of the best yields available on L2s. The Ignition Sparkle campaign can be found at fbtc.com/ongoing-campaign.
Vertex Edge is now live on Say Network. Say users can now trade 50 plus spot and perp markets with the unified order book liquidity of Vertex Edge across Arbitrum, Blast, Mantle, and Say. The next 6 weeks, 850,000 Say tokens will be up for grabs as trading rewards every single week, exclusively on Say. Join Vertex on Say Network now on Vertex Edge. That's vertexprotocol.com.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Roll-Up. Today, we are going to be talking chain abstraction, commerce automation, intent solvers, and really some of the kind of cross-chain conversation that we're having. Really just pick it up where we left off today with Griffin. Griffin, you just got back from KBW. I'm sure you're a little warped there.
A little bit of jet lag, but I'm ready to go. It's Monday.
Yeah. How was it out there? Was it fun?
It was excellent. Yes, I think I've been for the last 3 years now, and it's great every single time.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to Singapore, first time in Korea, or first time in Asia. So looking forward to kind of checking it out. But that time zone is going to be something to handle. That's for sure. I do feel like that the Eastern world is massively growing, while some of the Western world of crypto is kind of in this different type of phase of growth with institutions and regulations and things. Feels like over there is still more of the wild, wild west, even though it's out in the east.
A lot of gaming too. I think, pretty early on with our business, we focused on Asia as a sort of growing gaming market segment. And if you look just historically, a lot of the innovative video games do come out of either Japan or Korea or other countries in Asia, and then they make their way to the sort of American publishing studios that are a little more risk averse. And you're seeing that in crypto. Like AAA gaming studios are building blockchain games. I don't know AAA gaming studios in America that are doing that yet, but that's very, very exciting because these are some of the best game studios in the world making highly compelling blockchain content.
Why do you think we haven't seen gaming take off in Web3 up until this point? But it feels like we're on the precipice. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, my real opinion is I think just games are really hard to build, and it takes a long time. And we're in an industry where the cycles are so fast, right? We're in a software industry. It's a global computer, so you don't even have to worry about distribution in different countries. So we're used to products that's going like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But a video game is really, really hard. It's 3D. You need a ton of people. You need a lot of money. It just takes 3 to 5 years to build a video game. I think that's ultimately what it is. Like they're just being built. They haven't been launched yet. They're coming. And when they do, I think people will forget about the fact that we had to wait. But just look at like modern titles, right? Like, it's like Grand Theft Auto. It took like like 7 years to build or something. I don't know the exact number, but it was a long time. And so it's a major production to build a AAA title.
Yeah,
We still don't have
it
the new
is.
Elder Scrolls. I've been waiting for that for like 12 years.
Nice. So you are a young guy like us, a bit younger than us, and kind of having. Is this your first time being a founder? Is this your first time
So
raising
I
capital?
ran an ed tech company like a
Okay.
lot of founders for like 9 months, and I tried to sell sort of AI software to a large bureaucratic university. And I learned very quickly that market wins in that scenario. If people don't want to buy, you maybe shouldn't try to sell.
Yeah.
But this is like the first venture-backed company I've built.
And so you studied a lot around computer science in school and kind of distributed systems work, and now building out Halliday, which you guys are describing as commerce automation. I just want to give you a chance to kind of go into your background at all, or kind of what you guys are building, and then we'll kind of take the conversation from there.
Yeah, happy to start with my background. So I attended university back in 2019. So I started my degree in computer science in Stanford. My focus was on systems. So basically operating systems, building software for bare metal hardware. So I did some work at the hardware software interface. So trying to build software for like pure ARM chips. During my time though, I got very interested. I just liked math and computer science. And then the sort of intersection of those two things is either machine learning or cryptography. If you like continuous math, do machine learning. If you like discrete math, cryptography is more that avenue. So that's exactly what I did. And so I took a class called CS251, and I think the first lecture is the professor, he puts a slide on the screen that says crypto or blockchain is the intersection of distributed systems, cryptography, and behavioral economics. And I saw those three things on one slide. And I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be good. And that's actually what got me very interested in the discipline as a whole was that class. And that first slide actually, which combined many of my interests into one space. And that's actually, so after taking that course, I did zero knowledge protocol design. Worked with a professor there to do some interesting stuff, which led to just experimentation and building protocols, which eventually led to me leaving school to found Halliday.
Was there any like aha moments that you had when you were kind of going down the research rabbit hole, and then maybe you got pulled out and you took a look at what the market landscape looked like at the time? It was, I think it was like somewhere between 2019 and 2021 that you were kind of in this rabbit hole. And then, was there any intersections between the observations you had about the market and the research, and you were like, wow, that's a big problem, and it'll keep being a big problem until someone provides a solution?
Yeah, it's funny. So the thing that got me to be incredibly high conviction on blockchain was actually gaming. So I went it through the other way. I didn't go like blockchain to gaming. I went from gaming to blockchain. And the reason was, I think it was one summer, like I woke up and I see a notification on my phone. It's like, huge concert is performed by Ariana Grande in Fortnite. And I looked at that and I was like, what? Like, what is a superstar doing in a video game, right? Like now you have Travis Scott, Marshmello. They're performing in front of millions of people in a virtual space. And so I think that was just indicative of a trend, which is video games are turning into social platforms. So that's like the big backdrop technological movement, which is platform shift. You're going from Instagram to 3D synchronous virtual content. And that's huge. Like, and people talk about the metaverse, and this is a real sign that it's happening. Then the second part of it was actually in CS251, a random transaction on Ethereum mainnet was chosen. And it was from a game called Axie Infinity. It consumed so much block space at the time that, when you chose a random transaction, it was Axie. And so, the professor, he talked about how games were using the blockchain. So, but I was interested in that. And so I looked into the game and I heard about these things called gaming guilds. So one of the early guilds was this thing called YGG. And what they did was they would buy virtual assets and then lease it out to people. And so they're like a digital holding company in a video game. And I've played video games for a long time. I've never seen that before. Like maybe you see that sort of in Eve, but like this was like a venture-backed company. Like why'd you use an A16Z-backed business in a video game? That is insane. That is so incredibly awesome. So when I saw that, I was like, look, we're doing concerts in video games. You have holding companies in video games. Like that is the strongest signal for a major platform shift happening. Like basically you have capital markets in virtual worlds. And I wanted to be part of that. So the initial vision for the business was actually to build a lending protocol, to be the bank of that ecosystem. But that's what inspired me was like, look, if the metaverse is going to happen, it's going to be this amalgamation of 3D virtual content and digital property rights with sort of private interests.
That was a wild time in crypto. I mean, that was a nuts time. I remember we got some Axie Infinity land in the earliest of days, and that land was worth an insignificant or a significant amount of ETH, which was just ridiculous. That was a wild time, but very interesting concept of being able to have a kind of on-chain relationship between a kind of landlord and a tenant, or a renter and a buyer and a leasee. So that particularly led you to then think about how you can get assets into these networks, or kind of like what was the transition into this idea behind commerce automation? And maybe we can start like, why do you guys feel that is like a category or a way to describe Halliday, which is particularly impactful?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, I like to think about these worlds that we're building as basically, and I think it's a common analogy, but like digital cities. And I think fundamentally, a city is the combination of culture and commerce. Culture being the set of people, their values, their backgrounds, the way they interact with each other. And crypto has a lot of culture. It's a very sort of it's a broad internet culture. But the other side of that, which is commerce, is like the intersection, at least in the real world, is like institutions like the government, property law, law enforcement, contractual law. And when you have both, the result is a place like New York City, right? It's amazing. You have food, you have opportunity, you have jobs, you have economics. And it's this amazing experience. It's like the difference between New York and Disney World is night and day, right? You wouldn't want to live in Disney World. But you do want to live in a place like New York City. So we looked at the primitives we had in building that digital city, and you realize that it's actually just very hard to do it, right? Like you have the culture part. That's not what we're lacking in crypto. It's actually a lot of the sort of fundamental institutions that make a city work. One of which being commerce. How do you exchange value easily? How do you own things? How do you make that process of transferring an item from one, Alice to Bob? How do you get money into the system in the first place? How do you exchange it? How do you move money out? Those are all essential things that we largely take for granted in the real world, that there was zero infrastructure for on the blockchain, especially in the world where everybody's now launching their own chains, which adds a whole layer of complexity to this discussion. So when we looked at this set of problems, we said, look, commerce is important. Commerce drives activity and creation of goods and services, right? Like ultimately, the goal of commerce is to distribute goods and services. If it's too hard to engage in commerce, you don't get goods and services. So what we want to do is we want to make that process of distributing goods and services automatic. So it's automating those to reduce the friction so that more goods and services can be distributed on the blockchain. Like that is the principal driving motivation of the business, is to facilitate the creation of these sort of digital civilizations, these digital cities. And the way you do that is by making it easier to interface and to transact with other people.
Yeah, so I was on a podcast a couple weeks ago in New York City, actually, and so true, in New York City, it was so easy to get a bunch of people in crypto in a room, do conversations, facilitate business activities. These types of things on chain are like these hubs that we're trying to build. And as you kind of alluded to, right, we're big believers in this idea of kind of this modular future. We should scale out with different app chains. People should own their execution environment. we should be building this kind of roll up centric roadmap. I've got this like a veil shirt on today, so definitely like big fans of this vision. But with that comes complexities, like you're saying, and kind of how you guys have grown to find this complexity and find a way to solve it. And one of the complexities that I was hearing about from Jim from Catalyst on this podcast was, and actually an opportunity that I think that you guys are kind of tackling is, and he actually framed it as one of the biggest opportunities right now in crypto and still one of the wild, wild wests, which is this idea of being a solver for these longer tail chains. And so right now you have a lot of different teams who are helping to do cross-chain interoperability solutions for Arbitrum to Ethereum and Arbitrum to Optimism, these big L2s to L1. But there's also a large portion of chains that are kind of left out of that mix because for these large solvers like Wintermute and some of these others, it doesn't really make financial sense for them, or they just don't have the infrastructure to kind of like scale in that much of an adaptable fashion. And so he made the comment that if you have $10,000, you can figure out how to be a solver for some of these long tail chains. Right now, the APRs are pretty insane if you can kind of figure out the best niche routes. So I kind of wanted to bring this to you and just kind of ask how you're seeing this landscape right now of commerce automation and how it kind of ties into this intense based solving network landscape. And if you're seeing some of these opportunities out there right now, how you guys are thinking about them, and just kind of like what that landscape is looking like for commerce automation right now in terms of these long tail chains. And then I think that we can talk about more of like the onboarding to them as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, long tail mid cap chains have been a large part of our business. And we've been live in production doing this since last November.
Okay, because he asked me that too. He was like, are they live? Are they actually solving? And then I think I asked you and you were like, yep.
Oh yeah, I mean we've been solving for close to a year in this context. Like we service, Alt L1s and Avalanche rollups. ApeChain is going live very soon. So we're very familiar with this problem space. And DeFi kingdoms had this problem. And maybe to put it succinctly, is you launch your new blockchain, you generate a wallet. The very first question you have to tackle after that is, how do I unlock the value that users have and make it easy for that value to go to my network? Basically, I'm a chain. How do I increase my TVL? How do I grow my revenue as a business? And that's actually a very complicated question now. Back in L1 days, not very complicated. Now it is, because a user's balance can be in crypto on a different chain. A user's balance can be in a centralized exchange. A user's balance can be in fiat. And all those different pools of value have different pathways to your network. Some on-ramps support a subset of the chains. Some centralized exchanges support a non-overlapping set of chains. So what ends up happening to support all those sources of value is you just have to do like a year of integration work. It's just a lot of software. And you as a developer, you as a roll-up developer, you don't want to deal with that. I can tell you from first-hand experience, it's a pain. Like, we've done a year of integration work and we're still doing more, right? You have so many different bridges now. You have different intent protocols. You have slightly different EVMs, right? Not all EVMs are the same. They have, you have to redo your contracts for different chains, ZK chains versus optimistic chains, different message passing protocols. So what commerce automation is, and we like to describe it as like, it's not interop. It's a high-level automation service that drives composability on top of existing infrastructure. So you can think of us almost as this like programmable runtime that is purpose-built for the multi-chain world. So like, we're not trying to solve like the internet problem, which is how do you communicate from one chain to another. We're trying to solve the usability problem, which is how do you automate all of these different interactions, right? Because every interop protocol is a slightly different sort of data processing system. And so the problem now becomes like, how do you stitch those all together in a uniform interface? And that's exactly what we've done and have service to, over 28 clients.
Got it. So coming back to the kind of like original point, you guys are solving
these long tail L2s and L3s, and you're seeing that there's a lot of meat on the bone to be taken in these routes, and there's not much competition, or like is that landscape getting kind of like what is that landscape? Like, is anybody solving like app chain A to app chain B that have, less than 10 million TVL, or like are those just going kind of untouched? Like how are you guys seeing that play out now?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I would honestly argue that this solving part is not necessarily the important part of servicing those clients. And the reason I say that is, look, I think in the next 6 months to a year, message passing and native interop is going to get pretty good and pretty low latency. So like ultimately, like a token going from one chain to another, maybe you want liquidity bridging between major chains, but like a random L3, you're probably going through the canonical system. So we're solving in the sense that we are automating and moving data from one chain to another and making that very, very easy. So I think the opportunity is in building software that can service that world, right? Like the solving part, like we take zero margin on solving. We don't charge you for swaps. We're not monetizing via the fact that these are long tail assets. We're more building a technology platform that is built under the assumption that there's going to be a million chains. That I think is the very large opportunity. And we saw this in the sort of creation of the cloud, right? A lot of software was built for on-prem. There were a few software companies that said, no, there's going to be a lot of cloud stuff. And they built for the cloud and they did very well. That's more how I view it. I'm like, look, it's hard to orchestrate data and value to do commerce across many different rollups. The sort of liquidity management part, I do think is a separate problem that I don't actually think applies as much to long tail chains.
So you mentioned kind of orchestrating data like across some of these chains, and especially for commerce. And so I think we've heard a little bit more about this over the recent months when talking about chain abstraction, how this is quite a bit different from interop, which is typically concerned with more of the general message passing. And then you have some intent-based for value transfers as well. But, this is primarily from one place to another. It's A to B. When you want to go from A to B to C to D to E, yes, that's when you need something to automate the interop and string together the interop services so that to the end user, it is quite an automatic process. Now, so I kind of a two-part question. The first part, would love kind of a concise explanation of, you already explained how commerce automation is separate from interop, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Could you also kind of have us answer a similar question, but how does commerce automation differ from orchestration? And I'm going to attempt to answer that question, but would love kind of for you to pick up and build on top, which is that orchestration is stringing together these interop services. You guys take it one step further by integrating Fiat on-ramps and off-ramps. And so I think that's an entirely, that is a problem space that is particularly important. Would love to get into that as well. But is there anything else that separates you guys from kind of the existing orchestration plays, or generally how are you thinking about commerce automation and orchestration?
Totally. Yeah, I think like, to me, orchestration is a very, very broad concept, right? Like, most companies, most software is doing some form of orchestration. We orchestrate and automate processes with a mission. Like that's why I say commerce automation. And you sort of see it reflected in the product. We are building all the software for an outcome, which is to increase commerce on your chain. So that means we're not going to build orchestration automations that have nothing to do with facilitating commerce. So you can almost think of it as like, it is a general system that is programmable, but purpose-built for a use case and a set of use cases. Like we're probably not going to do the more, like there's a class of orchestrations we will most likely not move into as a business. Where we are as a business is those on-chain orchestrations that involve value, those automate, and I like the word automation too, because orchestration often applies or implies many different systems, but we also power things like recurring payments, right? Where you want to do something over and over and over again, but you don't want to worry about scheduling and fault tolerance. And that's a commercial use case. And then you're exactly correct, Robbie, in the sense that we have also worked with fintech businesses and payment companies because we think it's incredibly important that these players enter the space and that they don't need to worry about the immense complexity of dealing with 1 billion different blockchains, right? So let's take fiat on-ramps. Their business is a fiat business. Their business is fraud, it's compliance. Their business is not doing a year of integration work on the blockchain. And so we work with parties like that, and we do the hard work for them to extend their coverage to long tail chains. We extend the coverage of centralized exchanges as well. And we extend the coverage of any other fintech business that just wants to operate over the blockchain and not worry about all the different nitty gritty details. And so that's how I sort of categorize orchestration versus commerce automation is it's built for the use case. We're not trying to solve every orchestration problem at once.
Got it. Could you maybe illuminate an example of one of these paths? Like what is who is a client or a customer, or what is an example path that Halliday can help users either get some funds onto a chain, or how does this put this into practical terms for us?
And maybe a counter example too of like an orchestration problem that you guys wouldn't tackle because it's outside the scope of commerce automation.
Yeah. I'll try to think of like an orchestration problem right now. Like one might be like you have some mapping data structure in your application and you want to shard your execution across 5 different chains, like to something that's like very, very low level programming primitive that like you want to sort of do state management across a bunch of chains. Like we're a little bit more opinionated with what we do right now. We may go in that direction as the computing model gets more sophisticated. But I think right now, the problems we see revolve around commerce and revolve around automating commerce. Like that's really the mission of the company. Data management, not as much right now. So like we wouldn't be the best shared state machine library, at least right now. Then for an example of, okay, what's a flow that we support right now? A great one might be sort of talking about Apechain. And so that's an Arbitrum orbit that's on an L3. And now the question becomes, how do you support fiat on-ramping onto that L3? Well, so Stripe, one of the major on-ramps, they don't support L3s. They actually have very limited coverage, but they have a very good product, right? So what you can end up doing is either you can go fiat to base, swap it, bridge it across, swap again, bridge it up into the L3. So that's sort of that multi-hop process. Or you can go from fiat to mainnet and then swap and bridge it up into the L3. So you see a lot of these different routes. And so basically, succinctly, what we do is you say, look, you want access to a fiat on-ramp. That on-ramp supports only a few networks. We will route it and automate all those processes on chain so that you get the native on-ramp experience on your L3, on your L2. Doesn't matter if you use CCIP, layer 0, whatever interop solution you're working with, we'll stitch those all together at a higher level so that you can just get commerce on your chain.
Nice. And so what does that look like in more technical terms? Because from what I understand, there's an Oracle problem where if you're trying to connect a fiat on-ramp or kind of a fiat bank account with an on-chain account, and you want to do some intent-based solving for that account, let's say let's say it's the on-ramp route, right? And I'm going from my fiat bank account to Apechain. Well, how do you know as the Apechain solver to credit my Apechain account when on chain we have these resource locks, right? We lock the state. We know that the solver can get access once it finalizes on the canonical it finalizes on the destination chain. But do you guys have any insight to the fiat bank account, or how do you leverage Stripe to gain access to the fiat funds on the other side?
So how these on-ramps will work is they will actually convert from fiat to, let's say, USDC. So they'll settle with onto the chain with a cryptocurrency. And then the way you stitch all those things together, where it's sort of attestable, is we form these paths as a declarative system. So whenever you have like a lot of sort of underlying complexity, the approach that we've taken is you hop up an abstraction level, you build a higher level description that is declared. And we say, look, this is the path. This is where we want to go. Here's the input, here's the output. And here's maybe some different paths and dependencies. If the input is satisfied, the solver then knows that they can go out and do all the complicated computation to solve that path. So you can think of us as we've built this higher level programming model that knows how to talk to fiat systems, that knows how to interact with them, but then also knows how to abstract away all of the automation and composability complexity of the many blockchain world. It's almost a virtual machine. It's almost a higher level virtual machine. It's programmable, right? You can build programs. We're the ones building the programs right now and serving it as products. But the vision is actually to open that up and say, look, multi-chain programs have just become possible. And it's easy. Like right now, that sounds insane. Like nobody wants to build a multi-chain program because it's so incredibly complicated. But there's a lot of use case. Being like our entire company is a multi-chain program. And we want to take that complexity down, tenfold.
Yep. Got it. So user submits their fiat transaction via Stripe. Stripe serves USDC on mainnet, for example, and then you guys relay that USDC to the destination chain over on Ape chain and satisfy the outcome the user was looking to achieve. How extensible is this? Like, since you guys have the integration with Stripe, and Stripe every time, doesn't matter what destination chain the user is looking to end up on, every time they're just going to send some fiat through Stripe, it's going to land on mainnet. How extensible is your solution to go take that from mainnet, go serve it on Ape chain, go serve it on all the other Arbitrum Orbit chains or the super chain?
No, so that is that is the entire bet of this company. It's incredibly extensible. Like we can go to a new chain at this point in a day. Like building, I always tell people, I'm like, look, building software for 5 chains is very different from building under the assumption that there's going to be 1,000 chains. Like that is a step function level investment. You really have to believe in that to put in the time and effort to make your system work in that world. It's extensible beyond, look, for on-ramping, for different use cases, we are building a unified way to run these automations across any set of networks. You almost think of it as like a commerce version of Zapier, but that's smart contract based, right? And it could be on any single network. You can do whatever you want with it. We're just the initial consumer of that. We're the ones building the applications right now.
Yep. Smart contract Zapier. That's a good one. Okay. So one hypothetical example here is, and I think it's a reasonable one because in order to get to a level of thousands of chains or millions of chains, we're going to have several app chains from my perspective. I think that's kind of foreseeable as an outcome. And so one of the most popular applications right now, Polymarket, right? For example, hypothetically, let's say they were to go launch an app chain. I think it's a no-brainer that they would try to accept some sort of fiat debit card, credit card, some sort of fiat on-ramping, right? So really, regardless of what kind of like app chain stack they use, you guys could facilitate the on-ramping into some arbitrary app chain stack for fiat on-ramps.
100%.
Yeah, and what about the other execution environments? How is it as extensible there as well? Like Solana, Aptos, any VM on a roll-up stack, etc. So you're really all in on this then, because like that's how I see it out too. Like this is going the expansion of chains and the differentiator, like the slight differences in the execution and things are just gonna explode.
Exactly. So like what we say is like, look, there's maybe one or two high-level descriptions that we're building, this sort of higher-level automation syntax. Then there's maybe 10, a dozen implementations, right? How many VMs will there be realistically? Maybe we can look at pre-existing programming languages. Like usually there's not more than like 10 to 20 like really popular like programming languages. And then there's just going to be hundreds, thousands, millions of applications. And so that's the way we're building the technology. So we'll be on every single virtual machine. And that's because we've made the investment to define the higher level syntax separate from these sort of assumptions about specific virtual machines.
I think there's certainly there's a vector here where to get like right now crypto is just the same money just moving and flowing between itself, right? There's a lot of interop and composability between the super chains, between orbit chains, but we don't have the tentacles that reach into like the fiat world and easily compose the fiat world with the on-chain world yet. I think there is a motivation for the entire crypto community to work together to try to inject new capital into the cryptoverse. Whether it ends up on the super chain, it's going to end up going from the super chain to Arbitrum Orbit to mainnet to Solana. It'll flow once it's on chain, it'll flow. But there is a common goal that all of these on-chain builders have to get new capital injections from the fiat world into the on-chain world.
Yes, and that's, like I think everything right now should and is incredibly positive sum. Like the blockchain versus the internet in terms of scale we're just not even remotely in the same strata right now. So we should all want there just to be a lot more users, a lot more capital inflows. I also think we want to make it easier for there to be capital outflows so that people don't feel that there's an opportunity cost to holding their value on the blockchain. Like one of the problems with the blockchain is once you put your money on chain, it's very hard to actually use it. Like I can't go out and buy a Coca-Cola with my crypto balance, right? It doesn't talk to the incumbent networks. It doesn't talk to the point of sale merchant systems. So having those two systems communicate back and forth is a major undertaking. And it's something we're actually very interested in as well, is how do you just facilitate bidirectional value exchange? And this is why we say commerce and not payments in what we talk about. Payments is one way. Commerce is bidirectional. Commerce is a superset of payments. And I think blockchain uniquely enables bidirectional value exchange between users and application developers.
Welcome aboard on our journey into the singularity. This is the endgame roadmap for Frax and Fraxtal, the new L2 out of the Frax ecosystem that is totally based on fractal scaling. Fraxtal is a modular L2 blockchain built by Frax with modular and fractal scaling in mind. Fractal scaling is based on the Mandelbrot set of fractal images, and it explains how L2s become L3s and the entire app chain lifecycle goes through its evolution. The Frax ecosystem is made of some of the top builders in the space and has stemmed from its OG days of the Frax stablecoin. It is now in the LST space, the LRT space, and this Fraxtal L2 joins the existing suite of Frax products, including Frax Swap and Frax Lend. You can see Frax Ferry, the bridge to go from any chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, or mainnet into the Fraxtal mainnet, bridge your tokens, and bring your Frax assets into the Fraxtal ecosystem. Join today to get the best out of Fraxtal. You are still early. Join today, take part in our expedition into the singularity.
Could you walk us through a transaction flow, the reverse direction going from Ape Chain back through maybe Stripe, ending up in the Fiat bank account?
Yeah, so I mean, Stripe doesn't do off ramping. They're different people who do off ramping. It's again, this is where it's so fragmented, and you need these automation services. But a flow would be you withdraw from your L3 to an L2, you hop it probably across to one of the maybe a base, or you keep it on Arbitrum if the off ramp supports that. Swap that token into a stable, and then off ramp it to Fiat, and then you could use it somewhere. right? So you have this whole layer of coordination that needs to take place before you can even have access to those funds. And so that's what we enable to do. Is like, look, no matter where your funds are, no matter what shape they take, you can get access to that in fiat again through commerce automation.
Got it. Okay. There was something that came up in the news that makes a lot of sense. And I think, again, there's like, you mentioned the fragmentation. So I'm very excited to see that get solved over the coming months and years, hopefully sooner. And there was a recent piece of news that got me excited too, which was from Apple. They're opening up their Enclave chip so that you can use tap to pay. And so Circle and Coinbase put out this article where I think it was the founder of Circle is Jeremy Allaire that said USD is coming to iPhones or something like that. He couldn't say Apple Pay because Apple Pay is like their canonical brand for like their Apple Wallet. But basically, you're going to be able to spend crypto from your iPhone tap to pay, which is a major convenience unlock. And so how do you think this impacts your business for better or for worse? Like, is there an alternative flow, or just generally, what do you think this means for commerce automation as a market segment?
I think that 10x is the market size overnight. If large incumbent financial institutions start wanting to tap into the value present on the blockchain to drive commerce in day-to-day life, right? Like that sort of breaks the barrier between blockchain and just everything else, like the Rite Aid, the real world, buying coffee. And I think that's actually hugely important, because when you drive value the other way, it encourages people to come on, because now you can hold your money in an interest-bearing, stable coin. You can put it into DeFi. You can still spend it. You can still use it. And we also forget, for most of the world who doesn't necessarily have access to great financial products and services, this is a global way to do that. Visa's already global. Having them tap into that capability would be a huge win for the industry. Like, I think we should all really want this to happen, because this will just drive activity in and out. And then the question becomes, how do you reduce the friction to actually making that possible? That's what Halliday's for, right? You as a payments business, you don't want to worry about automation and orchestration of the flow of funds. As a user, you also don't want to worry about that. So we're this sort of interstitial protocol that just runs this compute environment that makes that very, very easy.
Yeah, I think not in that world, we're going to see the expansion happening as you're touching on, which I think is going to be materially larger in terms of liquidity, mindshare, users. And then I think on the other side, inside the crypto world, we're just going to continue to see the expansion. It's kind of modular expansion of new chains, new apps, new developments, new funding, and just like both of these growing at the same time. I think positions Halliday well, and I think positions many people well who are kind of seeing this trend unfold. So kind of like as we come to a wrap up, curious on how you guys are seeing this modular expansion, and as you guys have gone down this journey, taking this kind of gamble on, okay, there's going to be a lot of chains. How has your business model evolved, and how do you anticipate the business and kind of the offerings that you guys are bringing to the modular ecosystem evolving as the amount of chains continues to scale and scale and scale?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think one thing that we've noticed as this, the number of chains has expanded, and like I have incredibly high conviction that there's going to be more than 1 million chains before we know it. It's going to get crazy, and it's going to get crazy very quickly. Like these exponential growth laws are just absurd, and same with the internet. It's going to happen again. Because of that, we have focused the business. We used to do a little bit more, but now we are just focused on this problem, which is, how do you build programmable composability with the mission of facilitating commerce across 1 million chains? How do you actually support in 1 million chain world? Under the assumption that, look, there's going to be different canonical systems, different message passing systems, different dexes. That is a really big problem. And then how do you do it so you can write it once and it just works independent of the different systems? How do you make it programmable? Like, how do you build these recurring systems? Like, recurring payments are important. How do you build a recurring payment in a many chain world? That's actually a pretty deep question. How do you just build applications that run across many chains and give developers a way to do that? That's not absurdly complicated. There are no answers to this right now. I actually think we're in the phase of building these systems. And so ultimately for Halliday, we want to give developers programmable commerce. We want to give them, a Zapier-like experience where you can just stitch things together and it just works. You don't need to build, a sophisticated orchestration engine before you get building your app.
And we need more apps, and they're coming as their own chain. And I think Haliday will be there to service them. And I'm just particularly excited just to see this play out, and then to see how these interoperability solutions kind of manage. Then to see the more of the chain abstraction solutions bring it together, and then solutions like Haliday, which I think fit into the chain abstraction side of things, kind of really help put this all together on the dev side as well as on the user side. It does feel like we're very, very close. It feels like
absolutely. There's a great clip from the founder of Shopify where he's like, what a lot of people miss, because a lot of people passed on Shopify early on because they didn't think there was enough demand. He's like, in between supply and demand, there's just friction. If it's too hard to do anything, of course nothing will get done. And we're in that mode again, right? Where it's like, why are there no multi-chain apps? Well, because you need like a computer science degree and 2 years of investment through a venture-backed company to even start to tackle that problem. Like, of course there's going to be no apps. So our goal is in making it easy, in making it programmable, in making it automated. The cost for a new developer is now zero. We're protocol. You can use it for free. Just call our smart contracts. We're good to go, right? Like, that is a dramatic difference. And it's very exciting that we're getting to that point.
Cartesia is your home for app-specific rollups. At the forefront of developing new tools and platforms that enhance the capabilities of blockchain technology, Cartesia enables applications that are flexible and built to scale. Build on a full Linux environment and use traditional software libraries, but in blockchain development. Go to cartesia.io, that's cartesia.io, to learn more about building your own app chain today. Griffin, for people that are, for founders, builders, people that are building apps and chains, and they're looking to get on-ramps easily hooked up to their chain, get liquidity there, where can they reach out and kind of get on your list to get integrated?
Absolutely. I mean, you can reach out to me directly on Twitter at GRIFFINTIER, or our website. There's a bunch of call outs where you can book a call with us. You can reach out to us via email, any channel. It's more than happy to talk, or through our at HALLIDAY HQ, which is just our company Twitter. Happy to talk there as well.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man. Super excited for what's to come in the modular space. I think we've been focusing a lot on this chain abstraction realm, if you will, just because it feels like it's such a necessary component to make this work. It's like our big kind of bet and our big focus with the brand, with our investments, and just with everything is just, it's kind of all coming down to we need this to work. We need this part of the equation to work. And so really thinking this through with solutions like Haliday and just kind of the focuses that we've been having over the last couple of months, it does feel closer than ever. It still feels like an existential problem that needs solving, which means that there's a market for it, for builders and for products to kind of win out. So looking forward to catching up in a couple months again on the pod and kind of reassessing.
Yes, and the protocol version of this will be released in Q1 of next year. So big stuff coming out. I think you guys are in the right space. This is where all the hard problems are. It's very exciting.
It's fun.
I love solving hard problems.
Yeah, Rob's a big math guy.
Thank you guys.
You guys are actually both big math guys. Thanks for coming on, Griffin.